Rio de Janeiro is not the only major city on the Brazilian coast. 84% of the country's 200 million inhabitants are concentrated in Rio, São Paulo, Salvador de Bahia, and Recife. They have transformed the whole coast and destroyed 97% of the Atlantic forest, once more rich in biodiversity than Amazonia. This galloping urbanization siphons all the resources from the interior of the country. Without the coast's green mantle, its climate has been disrupted. But aside from its climatic problems, Rio is undergoing a general disruption of the environment. The poorest districts are at the heart of this ecological crisis. People here build their houses on top of each other with no help or urban planning, and are thus exposed to serious urban pollution. There are no sewers. The former streams and riverbeds are all cemented over, and that's where the wastes of 800,000 families all crowded together end up. The inhabitants have lost all contact with nature.
There are a lot of territory of the city where live more than 2 million people, and special poor people of the city, they don't have this green. They don't have this nature. They don't have, until now, all the public service about waste and sanity everybody deserves to have. And then this is also a social question.
Rio can no longer hold back what is now an inexorable process. The city may be just months away from hosting the World Cup, but its famous beaches are fast succumbing to pollution. And nobody seems to care. It's as if the sad truth were hidden by all the beauty. How could this beautiful city, the envy of the world, have gotten to this point? Rio has turned its back on nature. Yet it is the fruit of its environment, shaped and conditioned by geography like no other huge city on the planet. To understand its history, you have to grasp this powerful, wild, and monumental geography. What is Rio's true nature? First of all, there's Rio's bay, Guanabara Bay. It's gigantic, over 800 square kilometers, and was once the most beautiful bay in the world, home to mangroves and whales right up until the 1950s. It was also the home to the very first settlers who were fascinated by its unique geography. It was from the bay that the city expanded, threading its way through the natural obstacles. South of the bay, Rio curves around the majestic Mount Tijuca and its forest to reach the Atlantic, then spreads further, contained only by the famous morros, those gigantic needles of granite that give the city its striking appearance. For centuries, Rio continued to hug the coast. But in the 20th century, the city broke loose. For the first time, it outgrew its geography, straddling mountains and forests to gain new territory. On their way, the new districts devastated lagoons, marshes, estuaries, a whole mosaic of ecosystems. Only 3 big forests still stand, protected by their steep hills.
Rio is a very singular city in the world because we have an incredible quantity and quality of natural assets, 3 rainforests, 2 bays, lagoons, and spectacular oceanic littoral. And it's in the middle of 12.5 million people. And we are together, rich and poor people. We don't have a center, and then outside we are everybody mix with this nature.
Rio is held back by the ocean to the south, but another sea borders it to the north, a human sea, whose waves keep breaking day after day against the city's high ground for as far as you can build. And up there, where the city reaches its limits, the forest takes over. This forest and the water it produces are Rio's greatest reservoirs of life. 3 massive wooded areas that together make up the world's biggest urban forest. The last relics of the extraordinary natural world that for centuries was Rio, they bear witness to the powerful ecology that reigned here before the Portuguese colonists arrived. They were the first to declare war on nature. José Padua is an environmental historian. He has written several studies of the evolution of Brazilian society, and Rio holds no more secrets for him.
When the Europeans arrived here at the beginning of the 16th century, they saw a landscape that was very different from the European one. We had a continuous rainforest from northeast to south Brazil. At that time had more than 1 million square kilometers. But they were not able to perceive that the most precious thing, the most precious knowledge the people here had was the knowledge about what they call now biodiversity. Amerindians living in small villages of 500, 600 people, living what they saw as a simple life. They were a little bit disappointed because they did not see here in Brazil what cities or mines, how like the Spanish saw in Mexico and Peru.
No legendary cities, no gold, no matter. The Portuguese were skilled merchants and they decided to settle. Europe was in great need of wood, and the tree they called pau-brasil was so abundant here, they named the country after it. When the trees which they used to make dye were all used up, they turned to coffee, easy to grow on deforested soil. Wealthy, ever more opulent, the colony soon had 7 million inhabitants, all busily cutting down the forest and growing first coffee and then later sugarcane.
What I call the myth of endless nature, this view that you can use, that you can burn forests here because far away you'll find more forest and more forest. And this was not good for the establishment of sustainable ways of life because it gives this impression that you do not need to conserve, you do not need to care for the natural resources because they are so inexhaustible that you can use them careless.
In the 19th century, it wasn't just the forest that seemed inexhaustible. Of Brazil's 7 million inhabitants, the huge majority, 5 million of them, were slaves. After abolition, a huge population was left looking for housing, for work, and for an identity. To this population of slaves were added in the 19th century fresh migrants drawn from around the world by Rio's promise. The ebullience of the 20th century, especially in the 70s, radically transformed the city. The wealthy built the city of skyscrapers against the backdrop of virgin forest and with views of the sea. The poor just lived wherever they could.
With the mechanization of agriculture in Brazilian countryside in the 1960s and 70s, thousands of people had to leave the country and came to the cities. So they went to the hills, they went to the mangroves, and created what we call the favelas.
Who has not heard of the favelas? The dictionary translation is slums or sometimes shanty towns. In reality, the first time the term was used was in a district called Canudos. There was a little square there with a tree called a favela. A community grew up around the tree and took its name from it. Ever since, whenever a group of families finds an uninhabited spot and builds houses there, they call it a favela. True story or not, the fact is there are today 2 million inhabitants of 1,000 favelas spread out across the city with no urban planning or politics. Originally, the favelas nobly gave shelter to the poor. and the water that ran down from the mountains was pure. Today, those forest streams run through kilometers of favelas with no purification plants or sanitation. The water that flows into the Bay of Rio is polluted, toxic even. Biologist Mario Moscatelli is a key figure in nature conservation in Rio. Above all, though, he's a fighter. He's the spokesman for all those who, like him, are tired of the city's apathy and the powerlessness of the state. He's funded by residents' associations and real estate companies. And once a week, he flies over the bay and the lagoons of Rio to monitor the pollution and denounce the polluters.
In the 80s, you could still find 40 different species of fish in this lagoon. But there's just one invasive species left, the tilapia. There used to be hundreds of species of birds, reptiles, mammals. Today, there's hardly 5 or 10 species left. But you do find sofas, TVs, chairs, bodies, anything. It's a real sewer, and there's no more water. It's completely contaminated, not a drop of oxygen. And with all the gases it gives off, the sulfur and the methane, it makes your eyes sting. The smell's unbearable. It stinks. In this 130-hectare area, we've had to install about 2 kilometers of fencing. I think I must be one of the world's most qualified garbage men. I spend 95% of my time, me, a biologist, stopping rubbish getting into regeneration zones and clearing rubbish out of them. It's my worst enemy right now, the garbage, and the civilization that's producing it all and chucking it into streams and rivers.
Observing Rio's ecology since 1997, Mario Moscatelli has seen urban and industrial pollution poisoning ecosystems in the bay, from the lagoons, the marshes, and even the lakes, throughout the whole of Rio and its suburbs. Is it irreversible? No, there's hope. In these magnificent virgin forests at the heart of the city, there are still true ecological treasures. It is thanks to these forests that Rio could one day get back to nature. Up there, the forest is nature's barometer. There are species of animals that have been there for more than 25,000 years. The force of nature is still strong.
.6 centimeters.
Vinicius is one of the rare urban biologists to take an interest in Rio's surviving animals. Like this frog that's only found here on a 100-meter stretch of river deep in the forest. Folklore says that these are magical creatures, but this one looks so small and fragile.
Ailosia nassus is endemic to this region. Amphibians are the sentinels of the environment. The presence here of this individual indicates that this park has an excellent level of environmental quality, even of the water in the park. In well-preserved areas covered with forest and little streams, the quality of the environment attains a level that favors the presence of these animals. The further down you go in the forest, the more wastewater you find emptying into the rivers. So when you get near the houses, these amphibians tend to disappear.
No princess has ever kissed it, but all the same, this little frog, proper name Elosionasus, is still proof of a miracle. There are still many preserved areas from which Rio could regenerate itself. The battle is not lost. The water from the forests arrives in the lagoon polluted, so Mario Moscatelli wants to purify it. But how? By replanting along the shore the mangroves, those forests on stilts that live to the rhythm of the tides. They are a veritable biomechanical machine for depolluting the water, a natural way of putting air back into the water.